This image was found in a well at Ceisiwr. A man sits cross-legged on a cushion on a block. He's wearing a torque and originally had earrings. There are 2 holes in his head where antlers would have been inserted. A ram-headed snake is draped down each shoulder, resting its head in his lap. He holds something there, perhaps a plate, perhaps a bag. Also from Ceisiwr is this goddess. She is sitting with a bowl of fruit in her lap. She holds a cornucopia in her left hand and a pomegranate in her right. There is a ram-headed serpent wrapped around her with its head on the bowl. Because of the similarity in style, these 2 statues would have formed a set. Cernunnos is also accompanied by a god at Sant in Cernunnos. He has a purse in his left hand and a torque in his right. The goddess holds a cornucopia and a dove. There is the unique feature of a girl or young woman next to the goddess holding a cornucopia and a piece of fruit. This grouping is the strongest evidence for Cernunnos as god of the underworld, since groupings of Hades, Demeter, and Persephone were found in Greece, with Persephone shown as a maiden. On the back is another Cernunnos. He is accompanied by Hercules on his left and an unidentified goddess on his right. Both Cernunnos and Hercules are in platforms supported by the heads of cattle. This is most likely a reference to the myth of Hercules' 10th labor, where he brought back the cattle of Geryon. This theory is supported by the lack of cattle heads under the goddess's platform. Figures with antler holes have also been found at Candon and at Ceisiwr. This has given rise to 2 theories. First, that actual deer antlers were used. This may be possible for the Candon and Ceisiwr images. The Ceisiwr statue is 1.2 meters high, large enough for them, and Bober suggests that it was at least possible for actual antlers to have been used. The Candon image is only the top part of what was a larger piece. There were 3 heads, one on the central neck and the others resting on the shoulders. Any ram-headed serpent or carried torque would have been in the missing piece. The central head is wearing a torque, however. Because the bottom half is gone, we can't be sure that he had crossed legs, but the heaviness of the surviving piece suggests the necessity of a steady base. The 2 holes for the insertion of antlers are on the center head. I have been unable to discover their size, but based on the size of the image, which is 41 centimeters across at the base and 35 centimeters high, it seems possible to have used at least small antlers. This is not the case with the Ceisiwr image, which is only 18.5 centimeters tall, far too small to have holes large enough for real antlers. This bronze Cernunnos does, however, hold a torque in his lap and wear a bracelet on his right wrist, perhaps in a way similar to the Reims image's arm ring. He also has something else which is unidentifiable in his lap, perhaps a purse, perhaps some other container. 2 ram-headed snakes wrap themselves around his waist and rest their heads in his lap. The other ends are fishtails. What is especially interesting is that there are 2 smaller faces on the top of his head, one looking each way. He is therefore, like the Candon image, 3-headed, if less drastically so. The second theory is that the antlers were removable so that they could be added or removed to reflect the seasonal changes in the antlers of actual deer. However, there are traces of lead solder in the Ceisiwr and Ceisiwr images' antler holes, which means that their antlers were firmly attached and unremovable. It is possible that the Candon image's antlers were inserted and removed according to the season, but if so, this would be a unique feature, making it unlikely. But why have antlers that were made separately? I believe the answer can be found in the images from Amiens and Boré. The first is bronze, about 10 centimeters tall. He has the crossed legs of Cernunnos, and his left hand once grasped something which is reasonable to think was a snake. He doesn't have antlers, which has caused some to doubt that he represents Cernunnos. His right ear, however, is a deer's. The second image, somewhat larger at 40 centimeters, is made from 6 copper sheets soldered together. He sits with crossed legs, and the remains of solder on his thighs show that his hands once rested there. Whether they held anything is of course unknown. This image also lacks antlers, but his legs end in deer hooves. This has caused some to doubt whether this is a Cernunnos image. Bober suggests that he might be a priest, but this is unlikely. A priest wishing to connect himself to Cernunnos would be far more likely to wear a crown or hat with antlers than hooves. Instead, Amiens' ear and Boré's hooves would have been an easy alternative way to indicate a partial stag aspect. Based on these, I would like to suggest a more prosaic meaning for the separately created antlers at Candon, Ceisiwr, and Ceisiwr. It is very difficult to make antlers on a 3-dimensional image. Casting tined antlers requires a separate pore hole for each tine, and stone antlers would be in constant risk of breaking, either in the carving or after. In those cases where 3-dimensional stone images had carved antlers, in fact, they have come to us with the antlers broken off. Whether this happened in ancient times or at some point in their perilous journey to the present cannot be known, though. Bronze images, as we will see, have often solved the problem by simplifying the antlers. The problem was solved differently at Canton, Ceisiwr, and rerecord. Separately created antlers could simply be replaced if they were damaged. Rather than some mythical or ritual significance, then, we are seeing the result of the practical art of creating three-dimensional images. A different solution to the same problem may have been found in Ceisiwr. A cross-legged man wearing a torque holds a stag in his lap. His head is gone, so we can't know if he had antlers or not, but the stag may have been this artist's way. There are other images that, like at Ceisiwr and Canton, have three heads or faces. This one from Bavay is on what's called a planetary vase. The name came from the theory that the faces on the vases represent the 7 classical planets, possibly in the order they would be in as they are assigned to the days of the week. However, not all the vases have 7 faces, and when the faces are identified as particular deities, they aren't always in the order of the days of the week. This is a shame. If they were, we would be able to tell something about Cernunnos by what deity his position would mandate. As it is, what we have is a 3-headed bearded man with broken off antlers. The other 3-headed image is from Nuit Saint-Georges. An antlered god sits next to 2 other deities, one female, and one either a young man or a hermaphrodite. There's a purse on the ground next to the antlered deity. At the base of the grouping is a tree and a number of animals. These may represent a fertility or prosperity function for the deities, or may simply be an artistic choice. It may be relevant that among them are a stag and a bull. Most of the image we have seen so far have been sitting. There are standing images of Cernunnos, however, including, of course, the earliest ones. He is also standing in this statue from Mont Saint-Jean. His antlers have broken away, but their stubs remain. He holds a bow in one hand and a bill in the other. This bronze from Margeride shows a standing man with a torque in his right hand. His antlers are rudimentary but identifiable. The stunting is probably another way of solving the problem of casting antlers. We have only a drawing of this image of unknown provenance. A standing man holds the neck of a ram-headed snake which wraps around him. This image from Meaux may be an awkward representation of Cernunnos. His legs aren't crossed, but he is sitting. The bumps on his head may be incipient antlers, and he holds the purse we've seen elsewhere. We may have here a representation from an untalented sculptor. There are also some images which seem to show a female Cernunnos. A seated female image has antlers, the tines of which are somewhat rudimentary, probably for ease in casting. She sits with crossed legs. These are difficult to interpret. Are they Cernunnos? It is significant, I think, that the 2 cases where both hands have survived, she has a patera, which is an offering dish, in her right hand, and a cornucopia in her left. This is like the rerecord and Sant goddesses, so perhaps here there is a combination of that goddess and Cernunnos. There are a number of other images of cross-legged gods that can't be definitely identified as Cernunnos, but likely are. These include 5 images from Argentomagus, 3 of which are shown here. From the images we have already looked at, we can see a pattern of characteristics of a deity called Cernunnos. 1. He has antlers or is part stag in some other way. 2. He not only wears a torque, but holds one, or he holds a purse. 3. He grasps 1 or 2 ram-headed snakes. 4. His legs are crossed. 5. He has 3 heads or faces. Not every Cernunnos representation will have all these characteristics, but they do form a pattern which is sufficiently defined that we can say we are talking about a particular god.